Technology is working, so good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Paul Heinrich. I chair this meeting of the Development Committee in NDC, Friday 27th of June 2025. For anyone who hasn't attended one of these meetings before, the officers who provide and present a report and offer technical advice sit either side of me at the top table. In front of me in the central area sit the members of the committee who will be making decisions on the items on the agenda. Will officers please introduce themselves?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Lyon. I'm the Development Manager.
Good morning, Claire Shopland, Democratic Services.
Good morning, Russell Stock, Senior Planning Officer.
Emma Denny, Democratic Services Manager.
Good morning, Isabel McManus, Planning Officer.
Amy Smith, Senior Planning Officer.
And finally, Russell Williams, Assistant Director for Planning.
Thank you. Welcome to members of the public in attendance and to those who are viewing this meeting remotely. For those members of the public who have registered to speak, I will call you to the front to the end of this table at the appropriate time. Remind you, it's only registered speakers who are able to speak. Before we start formal business, usual notices. Fire alarm, we're not expecting a drill today, so if the alarm does sound, please follow officers to the marked exits and make your way to the car park or to the flagpole at the rear of the building. Obviously, do not use the lift. If you have a mobile phone, could you please make sure it is to silent or off? Thank you. Depending on how the meeting flows, we'll take a short break, coffee around 11. And if we are still within business at that point, I would remind members of the public that not to speak to members of the committee during that break. If you haven't found, the toilets are out in the foyer. Thank you. Can we have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Beattie, Councillor MacDonald, Councillor J. Toy and Councillor Vickers.
Thank you. Substitutes?
Yes, we have Councillor Adams, Councillor Bayes and Councillor Rings as substitutes.
Thank you. Then we move to item 4, minutes of the meeting of Thursday, 29th of May. You have all had them in your packs. Take it you have read them. Are there any errors, amendments or alterations? No. Are we happy to accept them as a true record? Please raise your hand. Thank you. Item 5, items of urgent business. I have none.
None received.
Thank you. Item 6, the order of business will be as on your papers. Move to item 7, declarations of interest. Councillor Ringer.
Thank you. I consider myself predetermined on item 9, and so I will abstain from that vote.
Thank you. You may speak as local member, but not as part of the debate. Councillor Adams.
In respect of item 11, I am a town councillor and they are the town councillor, the applicant. However, I haven't actually been involved at all in the application, wasn't even aware of it before it came forward, in fact. So your judgment, it might be easy if I just stay out of it. I'm sure it's not a matter of controversy, but if you feel comfortable, I'm happy to get involved. And obviously, it goes without saying, I've called in an application today, so I won't be voting on that.
Thank you. Right, let us get on to business then. So directly to item 8 on our agenda, the return of Chroma PF/24/2341, which we deferred at the previous meeting for further information to be received. Mr. Stock, present please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Hello, good morning, members. Yeah, as the Chairman just mentioned, this application has been before committee before, back in February of this year, where members decided to defer the decision so further information could be provided. Further information was provided in March following that committee, and a summary of that information is set out within the agenda addendum on pages 16 and 17. Since the publication of the agenda last week, further information has been provided, and that's consisted largely of a landscaping schedule and management plan, an altered site layout, and that included a widened access, which we'll look at in further detail. So I'll run through the slides with you now and highlight the changes that have taken place since the February meeting. So again, for context, this is the application site outside of the settlement boundary within Cromer. And yeah, there's the highlighted listed buildings there for note. I'll run quickly through the photos again to remind you what the site looks like. Sites through in here. The site is this parcel of land, the other side of the trees here. On this side in here, looking towards Hall Road. Within the site itself. Again, looking within the site and the access track to the concert field behind. The site here with the agricultural buildings located there, and then there's the industrial and commercial units beyond that. So the plan before members at the February meeting was this one on this side, and then following amended plans being submitted in March, this was the plan that was then submitted, which didn't change the layout. So subsequently received this week, this amended layout has been provided, which has moved the units closer towards the agricultural buildings, reduced the area of parking, has widened the proposed access down here, and has relocated the track here to the concert field slightly further away from the access. The buildings themselves remain the same as previously considered. Those are the buildings, they're the same as previously looked at in February. So this is the amended side section that's was received this week. It's moved slightly closer to this building here. As I said, the buildings themselves are the same. Additional planting is being shown between Hall Road and the buildings. A copy of the landscaping plan that was received at the end of last week and shows further planting of trees and bushes and stuff around the site. Given it was only received last week, I've got no formal comments from the landscape team, but verbal discussions with them, they're largely happy with the landscaping being proposed. The species and mix of plants is considered to be broadly acceptable. So this is the proposed access changes, and the agent has provided this plan to sort of demonstrate what the intention would be, is to cut away of this sort of verge and hedgerow that sort of separates this private access drive here with the home farm access here. So it would come out wider. Highways have fortunately been able to comment on this. And they welcome the improvement to the access width in general terms. However, it's not in accordance with what they would be looking for. So they've suggested that further information and revised access details could be secured through condition, albeit there's a few unknowns at this stage in terms of how they could achieve visibility displays and how much vegetation would need removal to accommodate this access. So it's a plan from the February meeting showing its location in terms of the town centre and Cromer, as well as the surface water flooding issues. So in terms of the consultees, like I mentioned, I've had informal discussions with the landscape officer and she's largely happy with the landscaping proposals submitted. The tree officer still maintains their objection, as we don't have an ARB report to establish what trees are going to be affected, how many would need to be removed, and those kind of details. So and with the changes to the access, that's sort of raising further uncertainties about impacts on trees. So their objection still remains. Highways have commented, and their objection remains in relation to the suitability of Hall and Metton Road for additional traffic, but they have acknowledged that a suitable access based on the proposed changes that have come in this week and with further changes could be made acceptable. And at this stage, given it's only been a number of days since the amended plans have come in, we've got no other consultee comments at this stage. So the updated recommendation is set out there. So it's basically the same, barring condition, reason for refusal 8, which related to the access. So now we've sort of fairly confident we can secure acceptable access by condition. That reason for refusal can fall away. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you from my end. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have a couple of speakers from the Town Council. Colin Robb. Want to come to the front, please? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Colin Robb. I'm representing Town Council and we're supporting the application. As a town, we can't afford to lose successful, growing, industrial type businesses to other parts of the county. The town cannot thrive based on encouraging retail type businesses only. So I've got 3 points I'd like to make in favour of this. The first is employment opportunities. These will either be new jobs or jobs that are being displaced from other parts of the town. Where jobs are being displaced, this type of development could be extremely urgent, especially if affected businesses could cease to exist because of timing. The second is potential skills development for school leavers. Depending on the type of new businesses in these units, it could be one of the few local businesses where school leavers can learn new skills locally, especially if there was an element related to key skills shortages, for instance, like construction, electrics, plumbing, etc. It's also an opportunity for new local services. The units could house small service businesses not suitable for a high street location where they might need for storage or workshop facilities. We are probably about to build more than 500 new homes in the town. We must not miss opportunities like this to create local jobs. Small discrete developments like this could become hubs of business startups, helping the town grow some sort of economic strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no objecting speaker registered, no supporting speaker registered. Local member, Councillor Boyle. You can speak from there.
Thank you, Chair. I come this morning in support of this application, and I did speak previously. I mean, the application itself is called Home Farm Enterprise Zone, which to me gives a clue as to what it's about. It actually is an enterprise zone and there are already units there. And we are terribly short of land in Cromer. And the people that are going there, would be going there, are crucial to our town. I believe that the development falls within the policy framework of EC3, as the site's been used for a mix of agricultural and business units since 2003, if you look at the site as a whole. In my view, the weight of balance falls to the use of this land as an extension of the existing business of letting units to support the maintenance of a historic building. This project, in my view, would benefit the local business community as there are insufficient industrial units available locally and little space to put them on. From my knowledge of the town, I believe this development is in accordance with policy EC5, as suitable locations within the town centre would not be able to house such business. Where would they store their equipment? Indeed, the local businesses who would be located in the units already provide vital support for the actual town businesses. And so a balance of positive retail impact is the more likely outcome. The tenants who are seeking to be housed in the units are existing local businesses who need to find new premises. They already frequent the roads in and out of Cromer, so the impact would be minimal. There would hardly be any difference. And now there's been the adjustment of the entry exit that will improve the existing businesses in there anyway. And as Councillor Robb said, we've got a huge developments coming to Cromer with probably around 700 homes being built. The harm to the Metton Road is more likely to be affected by those than a few small business units. And the businesses proposing to go there don't have a constant flow of traffic, and they don't have significant a number of regular supply vehicles. I walk the area freely and I'm familiar with the surroundings. I believe the area is really well concealed by trees and vegetation already, and they've offered much more planting anyway. The land's been used since I've known it, and I regularly go up that way for parking various pieces of agricultural machinery over the years and storage of hail bay. It's not a highly used land for vegetation and rare plants. It will also ensure the future of long-standing local businesses who will no longer have a base in Cromer due to the shortage of units. The current use of the site is not visually attractive. I think we saw that in the photos, and therefore I don't see that the intended use would be detrimental. It's always been a bit of a storage area, although obviously it was agricultural storage rather than anything else. I believe with more sympathetic screening, well-maintained units with parking behind a screen would not look worse than the agricultural machinery. Historic buildings and places raises concern that an impact analysis on the nearby buildings has not been provided. I don't know, not sure if it has now, but the area is so well screened and it's in a dip, so I can't see there being any significant impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just one question from me before we move into debate. How many industrial units are currently vacant on the estate across the way? And whether the demand is as claimed.
I don't know that exact answer. The planning agent did send me a link to Rightmove showing the current commercial unit availability in Cromer, and there were a number of sites that appeared to be available, but there was no analysis provided with that information. And yes, that did include some vacant industrial land across the road, which is designated employment land within the settlement boundary of Cromer.
Thank you. Who wishes to start? Councillor Brown. So what's the protocols? Yeah. Okay, you go ahead, Councillor Adams.
Sorry, thanks. So,
Regardless of
there are two of us. No, thank you. Well, first of all, very simply, Cromer needs this development. We have businesses that will soon not have the use of their current premises, and these are Cromer-centric businesses who have long been here. In one case, having called the town home since 1897. These are businesses who hire local families who are paying their mortgages and have young children, and businesses that have upskilled younger members of their workforce. The town is reflected indeed in one of the names of those businesses. They do not belong anywhere else. And as demonstrated in the correspondence received by the council, these businesses have tried to secure alternative premises to no avail, including across the road, I believe. This application is very much demand-led, and I can confirm we do not have a single commercial unit on the market at this time in Cromer. And despite there being plots of land available, they are either allocated for other uses or otherwise unavailable. And in respect of one business, they are expanding. They need to expand to survive. and this application is for the expansion of a modest size commercial and industrial site that has existed without any issues, certainly at least in my 16 years as an elected councillor. This is also a significant investment, likely between £500,000 to £750,000, and given what I have mentioned, is of strategic significance to the town. I do believe there have been significant changes in design here since last considered, with the layout and landscaping, significant number of trees being planted, actually amounting to what I believe is actually 40% of the space will be tree planting. And the site is already heavily concealed by existing landscaping features, as you saw in the earlier images. And I feel that heavily protects the listed property, which itself I actually see as subservient to the farm. It wouldn't have existed without it. And I'd go as far as to say the outlook from the property, as alluded to by Councillor Boyle, my colleague, it is improved as a result of the development. However, I accept you may wish to deal with outstanding matters around B&G and acceptable heritage evidence by condition. The Highways response to the application was far more nuanced this time, if you haven't read it, albeit it was not an issue of significant concern to the committee last time this was considered, with one committee member having attested to their own use of the access in coaches, but an improved access has been committed. And what's also changed here since last discussed is the road now has a 30-mile-an-hour limit introduced, so the town this road can continue to play a role in the town's economic future. The Highways response doesn't mention that fairly significant material change, so I thought I'd highlight that. So I would urge you to support the application and deal with any outstanding matters by condition. The benefits here far outweigh the policy constraints, and anything less really than providing a clear pathway towards approval will have certainly a negative economic impact on the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Frustrating though it may be for the officer acting in this case to have so much outstanding information after sort of, 5 months. I am not comfortable with so much information outstanding coming to a firm conclusion, a firm decision today on this case. What the slides don't show is, if you had an aerial view, this is more of an infill, because there's substantial presence on site of the industrial units which are behind the agricultural units, and I don't think we get the full picture. The nature of the land has morphed into well, if it isn't dark brown field, it's sort of light brown field in its status over time. And I think what is key to this application is understanding the impact on businesses in the town through the sequential test. And I know some information has been received, but I don't think it's been adequately analysed before it was submitted, and I would like to see that. I know that members will be nervous probably about supporting a deferral for a second time, so I would put a strict time limit on that. I would say that we need to have this outstanding information, much of which I think could be conditioned if we were to approve it within, say, 28 days. There's no committee meeting in August, so I would propose that we bring it back in September. And therefore we take a vote on this, but obviously we would have to deal with the substantive point first before we voted on deferral.
Yeah, just to correct you, so there is a meeting at the end of August.
There is a meeting at the end of August.
Yes.
Oh, it's probably the only committee meeting in the diary then for August.
Councillor
My
McDonald will
apologies.
be in the chair for that.
My apologies.
Oh, feel
I'd be quite happy for it to come back to August.
yeah. So are you proposing deferral?
I'm proposing deferral.
For
Chair, yeah.
deferral. Okay, we are now debating deferral. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I'd support that. I'm uncomfortable with deviating from policy, and I do think there's heritage harm. But what really I would like to know about is the economic benefits has not been quantified in any way. And I do think, you know, the economic benefits are going to balance out the harm that this is causing. And if we don't have more quantification of what they are, I think it's difficult to assess it. That's my general point. The other point I have is the parking, because some of the suggested businesses going into this unit might have quite a heavy parking load. And I wondered if there was sufficient parking as a specific question, but I'm more interested in the economic.
Okay, are you seconding the deferral proposal? Thank you. That's all.
Yes, just to reiterate part of what Councillor Brown said for a second. So from an officer perspective, clearly we've had this application for some time. It came to you some months ago in that regard, and not a great deal had moved forward until the last week or so, as Mr. Stock referred to. And undoubtedly the application is, if I simplify it, better than it was in February in that regard. But I must admit, I'm personally not convinced from a professional perspective it's in a state yet where we could confidently provide a different recommendation than we did previously, hence Mr. Stock's perspective today. Equally, I'm not generally a fan of deferring something for a second time unless there's a particularly good reason, and unless there are some caveats, I suppose, for, again, want of a better phrase, within that. So in this particular instance, if the committee were minded to defer it, I'm certainly not here trying to talk you out of that. I think there is some logic in this case, and I agree with professionally Councillor Brown's observations that there should kind of be a cut-off line position of provide a final set of information, which could be no more than current, not force the applicant to provide anything, with a view to then consulting on that, and that all being done in time to come back to the meeting that is in the diary for the 20-something of August. I certainly wouldn't want to take it further than that. So professionally, I'd be comfortable with that. And I think that issue around the economic development piece that various people have referred to, for me, is probably the critical one for us to get to the bottom of with the applicant if you defer it, because clearly the highways bit has moved forward a step since last time, and the landscape bit was not yet in writing, has moved forward a step. So professionally, I'd be comfortable with deferral. Equally, the recommendation for refusal does stand.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson. Microphone.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the application, it looks like the applicants worked with you to improve the application, as commented. And I just think I think we need to look at the people diversifying, and that effectively that's what this is, a farm diversifying, and I think that should be supported. And the comment about is it needed or not, but I don't think you'd invest the money to build it if the demand wasn't there. It looks relatively small scale and suitable to me for where it sits. I don't need a deferral. I'll be happy to take a vote. But
thank you. Councillor Tory.
Thank you. I can see that there's a bit of worry about how many outstanding queries there are, but I think that this is stunting local business. And considering the likes of, like Sanders have been using that site for quite a number of years, and a couple of other businesses, it's not as though it's a new enterprise. And I fully support what Councillor Boyle and Adams have said. And I would be fully in support of moving forward with this and saying yes, but I'm not too keen on deferring yet again. But really the applicant needs to get this information in so that officers are happy with this planning permission to go forward. But I'm fully in support of this, I have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm sort of torn between deferral and pushing this one forward. All the reasons, all the objections, or the majority of them, started with insufficient, and that leads me to think that with the production of a few more bits of paper and some more discussion, we could push this on forward. So I will second the deferral, if I may, please.
Councillor Holliday already has.
Right, fine.
Thank you, Councillor.
And that's how I will be voting, but I'm very torn, I have to say.
Councillor Hankins.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not in favour of deferral. I think the local councillors and the local individuals have put together a very positive support for a growth plan, which is what this is for Cromer. Given the fact that a number of houses that will be in the area, given the fact that there is a shortage, a dire shortage of space for employment, this satisfies the three key elements of growth: employment opportunities, skill development, and the service development. So I would propose, if it may be said, that for approval subject to finalising some of these outstanding issues, if that's possible.
It's not at this stage, councillor.
I mean, I hear the sentiments of members about wanting to support the principle of economic development, and that's obviously your policies would support development that supports economic growth. But however, in making your decision, you've got to be fully aware of the impacts of development, because if you're giving weight to the economic benefits, how do you, without the full picture, how do you know what the other issues are that might weigh against the grant of planning permission? So as decision makers, if you've only got half the information or missing information, you can't make a rounded and balanced decision, and you're leaving yourself open to challenge later down the line. There's clearly some elements in here to do with habitats and trees and getting B&G resolved, which I think they are quite critical points, because you've got habitats regs point, that's quite a red line in terms of being able to grant a permission. So you'll need to have some of that information before you can actually make a sound planning judgment. So that's why our advice to you is that we need this information before we can make a final decision. So yes, you may want to support it, but if you support it, actually you could be weakening that permission because you've made the decision without having the full facts before you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my opinion is much the same as my colleagues to the left of me. I think it is a deferral. My concerns are, I don't think there's enough information. I think information has come in very late as well, so it hasn't been available to sort of take part of the consultation or the write-up of these minutes or information. I also think it's about consistency, as Jeff has just said. It's about making sure we treat each application consistently. And I don't think there's enough information about jobs, education, training, etc. opportunities that were actually mentioned during those supporting statements.
Thank you. I'm not ignoring you, Councillor Adams. Just that I'm advised that your positions tend to indicate that you are predetermined, and therefore, other than your local
I do think there's something that hasn't been mentioned, but I feel like I've got to say it. The committee do need to recognise here that there's been a fundamental disagreement between the applicant and the planning authority over whether this is an extension to an existing business under the EC3 policy or the EC5 policy, which is being applied, and that hasn't really been mentioned within the report. I do think that's a fundamental reason, because you're talking about here sequential test, aren't you? Can we call a spade and talk about the things that we're talking about that are missing? And I'm concerned that hasn't been mentioned during the debate. I mean, we're talking here about businesses that exist outside of the town centre and exist at the moment. They all exist either in or outside of the town centre. And we can't therefore say we're concerned about the impact on the town centre by them continuing to exist outside of the town. So it just doesn't sort of quite make sense to me. So I think if we're going to defer this application again, we do need to work a bit closer with the applicant to see this through.
It could also be considered that the applicant must work more closely with our officers, but.
Well, can I just say we only saw
No, I'm going to
notification.
stop you there, councillor Adams. We could be here a very, very long time. Mr. Lowell, isn't making for a final comment before we move to vote on the deferral?
I mean, it would be good to hear from the applicant that they are willing to work with officers to resolve this, because what I don't want is members to defer again and we're back in the same position in at the end of August, because I think we can read the sentiments of the room that we would like to try and support this proposal, but to get there, we need to cross a couple of bridges. And that requires the applicant to provide that additional information to enable us to cross that bridge and to get to a place where we can grant permission. But without that, I can't reasonably recommend you as a committee make a positive recommendation, because you don't have the information to make that, in my view.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, and we'll take a vote.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak again. Yeah, I just want to put it quite plainly. There is obviously a mood here to look at this and to test whether the recommendation for refusal today is appropriate. And the message I want to give to the applicants is that if they do work proactively with our planning department, that recommendation could well change when it comes back to committee. But if they don't, then the recommendation will be the same as it was in February, the same as it was today. And then we'll have to obviously take a vote, and that I think would present a greater problem for the applicant. So we're giving a last chance saloon opportunity if we vote for deferral today, and I would urge people to do that. So the basis on which we make the decision is sound under planning legislation, and that's what this committee, the bigger picture for this committee is what we must maintain in all the decisions that we make.
Thank you. I think that's absolutely clear, councillor. I sensed last time and again this time that there is general support in principle, but we must comply with all of the planning requirements. And that we currently cannot demonstrate. So if we can go to the vote on the proposal is for deferral to be returned to the meeting in August. And we hope that the applicant and planners can get together and deal with these outstanding matters.
So I have councillor Adams abstain. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitztillett. For. Councillor Hankins. Councillor Henrik.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Netherway. Councillor Ringer.
Against.
Councillor Kaytoy.
Against.
Councillor Varley. Councillor Bayes. Nine. I have 9 for, 2 against and 2 abstentions.
Okay, the application is now deferred to the August meeting to enable this outstanding information to be provided. Thank you. If we can now move on to item 9. This is in Lower Bottom, PF/24/2705. When you're ready, Jamie.
Good morning, everybody. The application seeks full planning permission for the demolition of an existing workshop building and the erection of a new building as a live-work unit including the erection of a cart shed. There is a storage building on site that would also be reclad. In terms of the wider site, the application site is located in Lower Bodham. It's kind of a light orange star on the map, to the south of High Kelling and really to the south of Bodham itself. In terms of closer to the site is to the south of Church Road. It's identified in red. It's historically operated as a haulage business and as a coach workshop. You'll note that there's a woodland to the south and the southwest of the site and agricultural fields to the north, the southeast and the east of the site. And there's also some residential properties along Church Road, namely Highfield House, Church Farm and Church Farm Cottage. In terms of the proposed site plan, existing site plan is on the left. Mostly all of the buildings will be demolished, noted in the red stars, albeit an existing store that's in yellow that will be reclad. In terms of the proposed plans, the live work unit would occupy a similar position on site and is noted on the plan as the main building. To the rear of the main building, there'll also be a first floor raised terrace and a garden provision, along with a cart shed and existing store to be retained. The cart shed will be replaced. Moving towards the proposed elevations, here we've got the north and the south elevations, the north elevation being the principal elevation facing Church Road. Whilst existing building is approximately 5.9 metres in height with a varied roof line, the proposed live work unit is significantly larger at nearly 10 metres in height and approximately 2.5 stories using the roof space. It also has a continuous 28-metre long ridgeline. It therefore is significantly more visible in the road frontage. In terms of materials, the existing building has a mix of cement corrugated roof cladding, timber cladding for the walls, breeze blocks as well, and some metal crystal windows. The live work unit proposes black slate roof tiles, corrugated cladding to the lower elevation and timber cladding to the upper section, grey aluminium windows, and the south elevation will also include a bank of solar panels. Just moving quickly to the side elevations, the existing building has like a single story rear wing where the proposed building doesn't, but as you can see on the plans, there's a rear first floor terrace. The materials are the same as previously discussed. Now, in terms of the ground floor plan, the top left plan will show the existing workshop building, single story only, containing a workshop and an open cupboard area. The live work unit will be split over 3 floors. The ground floor will have a workspace comprising of a storage, office and sales and showroom area, and as part of the ground floor, the first floor contains 5 bedrooms, all with ensuite living, dining and kitchen area, and a roof terrace, and the whole roof space is identified for storage. The cart shed is to be replaced. The plans show it's being 40 metres in length, 4 metres in width and 6 metres in height, with the materials of timber block or block frame for the lower walls, PV panels on the roof with a corrugated roofing as well. And the existing store, which is proposed to be retained, it's 5.6 metres in height, and it's in situ on site, and the plans detailed to be clad with black corrugated walls, corrugated roof and timber frame doors and windows. In terms of the context of the site, I'll just run through a few photographs for you. This is looking sort of southeast in the site, sitting outside of the site, so just get a wider landscape view of the context of the site in which it sits. This is a view looking into the site at a closer scale. It shows the main building. It also details the condition of the building and the existing palette of materials. Just looking through the opening within the main building to the rear wing of the existing building, just to get a further detailed view there. Now here, this is looking east within the site. This is the main building here that is to be demolished. There is a steel frame structure here to be demolished, and this is the store to be retained. And in the middle of these buildings, there is the cart shed, which is here. So this building to be retained, this to be demolished. There's a small building further to these to be demolished. As you can see, the site, it sits to the south of the site with the bank of trees to the rear. There is no high-rise objection to the application. They've had regard to the extant use of the site. as a haulage yard. However, it's just useful to have a view of looking east and west along Church Road to get a view of the sort of the single lane nature of the position of or the location of the site. Now, members will note the office report in the committee agenda, and it details the application in full, local representation, including parish and other consultative responses. And the following list here from 1 to 8 is a reminder of all the main issues discussed within the officer report. Yeah, the main areas of consideration and policy conflict arise with the principal development, along with the design and appearance of the building and the impact upon the wider landscape area. In respect to area points 3 to 7, there are no objections from the resident consultees or really policy conflict, and subject to the principle of appropriate conditions so that officers are satisfied with areas 3 to 7. However, we do just need to await agreement with the landscape officer in respect to the biodiversity net gain and baseline conditions. So in terms of one of the main issues to consideration, it's the principal development. I'll just give a brief overview and summary of what's in the officer report. So we are looking at a live work unit in a designated countryside location. So there are 3 key areas to this. It's retail, it's housing, and it's employment. Now, if we're looking at employment, our core strategy policy SS2 limits development to that which requires a rural location. That is rural worker dwelling, agricultural worker dwelling, or affordable housing exception sites, essentially. This application is neither. So therefore, it conflicts with policy core strategy 2. There is obviously paragraph 84 in the NPPF that does allow for isolated dwellings as an exception to the planned approach. And obviously this is afforded weight under national policy. And with regard to paragraph 84, there are a number of criterions. Now, as part of these, the proposals do not reuse redundant disused buildings as required by criterion C because they are proposed to be demolished. And additionally, officers do not think that the design is exceptional as required by paragraph 84E. Moving on to the economic side of the proposal, national policy and local policy does support the rural economy. However, any proposal will need to be considered appropriate for its location based on policy compliance and will also need to be a result of the site-specific circumstances. Officers have given regard to the site as a previous haulage business as a fallback position, and weight has also been attached to the site as being brownfield or previously developed, which also has support in national policy. However, this does not provide an unqualified basis for allowing development which would otherwise conflict with local plan policy, such as those relating to housing and or retail. Also detailed in the committee report, officers do not consider that the residential element is essential for crime prevention. In respect to retail provision, the NPPF emphasised the town centre first approach to retail, and also our policy EC5 seeks to guide retail development in the most sustainable locations. This application is proposing retail development in a countryside location and therefore would need to comply with the 4 criteria within policy EC5. Officers aren't of the opinion that the application has been supported with the information to demonstrate compliance with either national or local policy in terms of retail provision. So therefore, whilst the principle of a new business similar to that previously operating from the site, which could generate similar levels of traffic or less, may be acceptable, it's not considered that a particular environmental operational justification for residential or retail development in this countryside location has been provided and therefore result in policy conflict in terms of the principal development. In terms of the other area that's the main consideration is the design and the scale of the building proposed. Given his scale, its massing and its height, and its small suburban appearance, it's not considered to contribute positively to the vine landscape character, and therefore we have an objection against with essential policy EN4 and EN2. To conclusion summary, the main areas I said are for the principal development and the design and the impact on the countryside location. So these are the main bullet points here and conclusions here, which I won't read out verbatim, they can be read, but I've summarised it for you. So whilst the principle of reusing this site for an appropriate economic purpose may be acceptable and would result in economic benefits, the matters of housing and retail provision and the sustainability of the site's location weigh heavily against the proposal. And notwithstanding that the council does not have a 5-year supply, the benefits arising from this development are not considered to outweigh the harms of achieving sustainable development. The proposal. The recommendation is one of refusal, with 2 apologies, it should say 1 and 2. One being the principal development, and the second reason for refusal is design and impact on landscape character.
Thank you. Very thorough. And, some conclusions, I feel. We have 3 speakers registered. If I can start with Parish Councillor JP Ringer. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Ringer.
Okay. I speak today on behalf of Bodham Parish Council to express our strong support for the application. We urge you to consider this application for what it is, a clear and much needed improvement on what currently exists. This site, once a busy lorry haulage yard, has become a derelict eyesore. Its buildings are rusting and decaying, and its presence increasingly a source of frustration to local residents. It contributes nothing to the landscape, to the local economy, or to the community. The idea that refusing this application somehow protects the countryside just doesn't add up. I ask you plainly, what is it exactly that would be protected by keeping this post-industrial relic? The proposal before you is a thoughtful, low-impact community supported scheme to regenerate the brownfield land into a working asset. A self-sustaining live-work unit that fits Bodham's rural character and supports a real countryside business. The showroom is for equestrian and country supplies, a business rooted in rurality. The design is off-grid, powered by renewables, and far more appropriate for its surroundings than the broken-down shell it will replace. It respects existing scale and form, and it addresses a problem that neighbours have been living with for far too long. And I must stress this, the neighbours support this application. Those who live nearby have written in support. They want to see the site cleaned up and put to good use and contributing positively to the area. We are all aligned, the parish council, the local residents and the ward member, and we are asking you to say yes. And this leads me to a point of genuine local disappointment. Not long ago, this council approved an application for a holiday let, The Shed, on Hart Lane. That application was not supported by the parish council. It was not supported by the ward member, and it was not supported by the residents, but it was still approved. That decision left people disillusioned, disheartened and unheard. So we ask respectfully, can we please have something that we do want? This is your opportunity to say yes to a scheme that's supported, sustainable and genuinely improves our village. Please approve this application.
Thank you. I have no objecting speaker. I have 1 supporting speaker, Alice Kemp. Will you care to come to the microphone, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. This proposal represents a rare opportunity. It takes a disused, derelict, former lorry yard, long an eyesore, and transforms it into a model of sustainable rural enterprise. We're not asking to build a house in the countryside, we're asking to build a purpose. A live-work unit designed off-grid with solar panels, battery storage and rainwater reuse, and 0 fossil fuels. It supports BFR Equestrian and Country, our growing North Norfolk business, already serving customers online, and now we're ready to offer local, small retail and showroom space. And as we've already heard here this morning, there's a significant lack of commercial space in this area. But it's more than just economic, it's environmental. The site is brownfield, the buildings are deteriorating. What's proposed is not expansion into greenfields, but transformation of a neglected site. We're delivering biodiversity net gain, planting new native trees and restoring habitat. This council has declared a climate emergency, and that means leading by example. This design achieves net 0 emissions in operation without subsidies or grid connections. It's circular, local and future facing. Yes, it's not directly in a village, but not every rural job is in a village. This site suits the rural economy it serves. And importantly, it reuses a site that was previously accessed by HGVs and commercial traffic. The proposed use would significantly reduce vehicle movements and lessen highway impacts on this quiet rural lane. We've worked hard to align the proposal with paragraphs 84, 88 and 125 of the NPPF, supporting rural businesses, reusing underutilised land and allowing flexibility in changing economic times. It's supported by the two closest neighbours and the wider village community, the parish council and the local member, who recognise its sustainability, rural fit and scale. The old site was for lorries, the new site is for life. Please support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And councillor Ringer.
Thank you. And before I start, can I just ask the slideshows put on, because there's a picture on there that I might quite like to refer to, if that's all right.
If you could flip through and
It is,
can indicate. which
yeah,
one.
it's the pictures of the road actually, which is looking the other way, but I'd just like to refer to that at one point. Not that one actually. That's the one. Yeah, thank you. Good morning, thank you. And again, I speak in support of this application, not simply as a matter of local interest, because I believe it actually complies with national policy aims, district planning priorities, and the expressed will of the local community and parish council. The proposal is exactly the kind of development the NPPF seeks to encourage. Paragraphs 124 and 125 urge us to reuse previously developed land, brownfield sites like this, to meet both housing and economic needs in a sustainable and effective way. What is proposed here is a genuinely rural business tailored to its surroundings. An equestrian showroom is not a town centre rival, it's a countryside specific offer servicing a customer base that is rural by nature. It meets a genuine rural economic function. It is also worth noting that the proposed building has been carefully designed to operate off-grid, relying on renewable energy, high efficiency materials and a commitment to sustainability. This clearly satisfies our core strategy policies EN6 on sustainable construction and EN7 on renewable energy. Furthermore, the application supports rural employment and enterprise in a way that fits squarely with NPPF paragraph 88, which encourages local planning authorities to enable rural diversification and economic growth. From a design and landscape perspective, the scheme has been developed with consideration to the existing scale and massing. Referencing the industrial structures already on site, this supports compliance with policies EN2 and AN4, which asks us to protect the landscape character and demand context-aware design. Far from intruding on the landscape, this scheme offers an opportunity to improve upon it. At the moment, the site in its current form does not serve the countryside well. It's a decaying haulage yard, it's unattractive, it's a crumbling collection of buildings that offer nothing to the village, to the landscape or to the environment. And this proposal replaces that decay with a self-sustaining development that brings people, purpose and productivity back to the site. Whilst I acknowledge the replacement is a larger building, it is set very low within the landscape and the topography works advantage here. And this is not demonstrated in the officer report. But what I will say is just look at these pictures. You go up quite a high bank onto the field to the north and that continues to elevate. So despite it perhaps coming across as being quite a large building, within the landscape that it exists, it will not be incongruous. The scale of this showroom, its specialised market, mean it will not compete with town centres. It meets a different need. And in any case, whilst it might not be accessible by bus, it is by horse. And I'd like to put on record that it's a policy failure, I think, of the current local and forthcoming emerging local plan that Bodham is not considered a small growth village. And I just wanted to get that one on record. The land is brownfield and its potential is going untapped. Our policies, including core strategy SS2, do allow for new build development projects in the countryside where there is an environmental or operational justification. And I would argue that both are present here. Replacing a derelict eyesore with a well-designed renewable powered employment generating unit is precisely the kind of justification and exception this policy was intended to support. We cannot afford to let perfect be the good of enemy, be the enemy of good, sorry. And with the addition of carefully considered conditions, this is more than good. And it's actually a rare chance to turn a blight into a benefit. To permit a building that speaks to the needs of today's countryside, resilient, sustainable, community supported. Planning is a balancing act, I know that, but in this instance, it's my view and clearly the view of the parish council and local residents that the balance should be tipped in favour of support. Please, can we not miss this opportunity to put something positive here? The alternative is continued decay, or maybe even a return to heavy haulage. I know what I'd prefer. Thank you.
Thank you. Debate, councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. The reasons for refusal, number one, I don't particularly agree with, because I see it as a haulage yard, so I don't quite understand that. I would like to look a little bit more at number two, and particularly the height and scale and mass of the building proposed. Could we have the slides up of, and was it nearly 10 metres?
Yeah, it's 9.9, which is a tall building, and
Yeah.
with a 28-metre long ridge line makes it quite a mass of a building as well in terms of general design and scale.
Have we had like a visual architect report, landscape report from different distances?
No.
So you say there's not going to be an impact, but we can't actually, we haven't got a report on that.
Trust me.
Local knowledge is a wonderful thing, and I've used it myself many times, but we haven't got the visualisations for members who are not familiar with that lane. Yeah. Do you want to come on? No, okay. Councillor Toy and Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Just one question. The living accommodation, is that intended to be for people that are working in the retail part of it? What is that intended for?
It was my understanding that the application is for the applicants to live on site for security measures and for their family to live on site, reside and work from home, as well as part of the
So
business
it is-
operations.
It is going to be a home.
It's my understanding, it's part of the application to be home, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Yeah, like councillor Patterson, I don't have a problem with it in particular and would welcome it. But I am concerned about the second item for refusal, scale, height and mass. Now, somewhere along the line, there was a picture of the front of the building, I think. Could we have that back up, please?
I think it's slide 5.
That's the one. Now then, is that screened at all by natural hedgerows, trees, etc.? Whereabouts on the site will it sit within the site? Will it be screened?
So the siting of the building is in the same position as the existing building. It's on the same orientation.
And we're now
It's
looking
taller.
main building, yeah?
Sorry?
Main building?
Yeah, the main
Yeah.
building is the new building, and where's the arrow? This is the building to be demolished.
Yeah.
And it's the similar position to the proposed building. It's the same footprint essentially. It's obviously taller and with a longer ridge line, because this one, the ridge line of the existing building is varied. So it's essentially 3 metres taller with a longer ridge line. So it's set back within the site. There's a woodland to the south of it, but it's and there is obviously some landscaping to the front, and obviously the road curves. There, you know, and what people said, there is a bank, but it's significantly larger building than is existing, and is a massive a build for what is both a residential property and a commercial rural enterprise. So it's a large building for a rural location, the scale of this.
Thank you for that. I do have concerns, but I don't think that they outweigh the general feeling that it should be approved. I think I can remember when Scarf Brothers were there. Bob Scarf was sort of a friend of mine, I think, going back a long, long while ago. But no, I think it needs clearing up, and I think it needs doing. I'm a little bit concerned about the massive, but I think overall the rest of it outweighs my concerns. So I would propose that we go against the officer's recommendation.
Stop you there for a minute.
I know.
So you
We've
know
got
the
to go
procedure. We
through-
have to
yeah.
refuse.
We'll go through the procedure.
Down the recommendation and then
Yeah.
take another.
Well, I'll
proposal
propose we
floor.
refuse the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't do that. I'll pick the procedure. You want to ask something there, Jim?
Yeah, just coming back to the point about brownfield land, 'cause clearly this is a site that's in a very poor condition, and actually some kind of redevelopment of some sort clearly would be welcome because it's underutilized. So we recognise that in the report, and Councillor Ringer referred to the NPPF guidance. It does talk about giving substantial weight to the value of using brownfield land, but it does say within settlements. So that's quite a clear distinction here, where we're not within a settlement here, we are within an isolated rural location. So the weight that you would give to the brownfield would have to be tempered to reflect the fact that it is in a unsustainable location compared to a brownfield site within a settlement. So that's why we weighted it in the way that we have in terms of the planning balance. Clearly, if you were to accept the principle of the development, fine, but that obviously the other concern about the scale for me is quite a significant point, and we are talking here a very tall building compared to what's there at the moment, and it's a large dwelling going with this live work unit. So the question for members is, if you were to accept the principle, would a smaller development be one that would be preferable? Because actually the scale of the impact would be much less if that height wasn't there, because we are talking quite a tall building here. And actually, yeah, you need to weigh that in the balance. Obviously, the local member said it won't be visible, but it's a tall ridge line and a long ridge line, so you need to bear that in mind. Okay.
Councillor Bayes.
Yeah, I'm actually in favour of it. I do understand the consideration of the mass, but I think there's such strong feeling from the parish and also local member, and strong arguments given this morning that quite clearly, I think that site needs to be redeveloped. I think the ridge line, I think my right honourable friend, Councillor Ringer explained that there is an increase in that, but I just wondered why there was a demand for that size of building. Is there a reason for it?
There's been no justification for the size of the building throughout the application. There's obviously the living accommodation is contained in the first floor, and storage obviously for the roof space, and obviously the commercial element, retail element is on the ground floor, but the justification for the size hasn't been provided. That is just that is the application proposal, what we've got in front of us.
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, obviously, if you talk about the ground floor where the business unit is going, I mean, that's not a particularly sizable element on its own. It's the 2 stories above that has the residential accommodation is the bit that really results in the visual impact, in my view. So that's why I say, if you were accepting the principle, would you want to see a revision to that, to the bulk of the building?
Councillor Adams.
I understand the policy constraints. What I didn't understand in the discussion that we just had is whether landscape visual impact assessment has been requested. So perhaps that could be mentioned after I've finished speaking. But I am familiar with the context of the site, being a village boy before I was a town boy. But I'm fairly comfortable actually in terms of the context within which it sits. I think in terms of the rural economic function, I think this is a form of retail that I think we should see as acceptable in this context. Again, a theme of today, we live in a rural area, and business activity will occur in the countryside to a certain extent. And interesting, you know, obviously we're seeing 3 call-ins today in support of applications that certainly have some parallels. But I think a suitable use of the land, which as I understand would be described as brownfield in this context, a rare event, and the existing permitted use is one of an HGV yard, which whilst, you know, I understand they probably have to get relevant permits again to resume that activity almost certainly, but it doesn't seem that would face many constraints. And therefore, I think it follows that this could provide a real improvement. This isn't a picturesque ruin, and I believe what the speaker said about it not contributing to the landscape or the character in its current form is correct, and I think it will improve the amenity, as the speaker also said, for neighbouring residents. So I think it's a good call in really to determine the benefits and policy considerations. And I think the benefits of reusing this brownfield land to provide a business and home means that the benefits outweigh those policy considerations on this occasion. Yeah, respect the opposite position. Would like to hear more about the LVIA, but you can see where I'm weighted. Thank you.
Councillor Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I'd just like to give my thanks to the case officer for the fundamental report this morning, and also to the speakers. It's really good to get that insight and local knowledge. I think it really does help us as a planning committee to have a good, coherent discussion and then get to that recommendation. I think this brownfield site deserves significant investment, and I really do believe that this application goes some way to providing that and certainly tidying up the site, putting it very simply. This council is dedicated to economic growth, and this application certainly fits the bill. This application will enable diversification. I'm incredibly encouraged to see the eco credentials within this application. I love the PV carport or cart shed in this instance, and I can only assume, Mr. Chairman, that the applicant was inspired by our own carport at our leisure centre, The Reef. So yes, really encouraged by that. I'm really encouraged by the tree planting scheme as well. So, Mr. Chairman, I am veering towards supporting this application, and I know we're not there yet, but I will be proposing that when we get to the time. Thank you.
Okay, before we move on to a couple of other speakers, I think it's probably right. I've got the mood of the meeting quite well now. Some details I'd rather you discussed. I will, after officers have made any further comment, whichever you wish to.
I'll chip in then. Thank you for the opportunity. I suppose I'm coming to this one relatively cold and listened carefully to the arguments and the direction of travel, from want of a better phrase, from what I hear from councillors. We've effectively got two reasons for recommendation before you, 1 and 1 or 1 and 2, as Ms Smith corrected it to. And I think there could be a clearer and more straightforward argument in this case in relation to the first reason for refusal being overridden, in effect, in that regard, by all the points that have been made about previously developed land and the benefits of redeveloping this for something appropriate. And potentially, I think that could probably extend to sort of residential live work type units. So to me, whilst I'm comfortable with the recommendation that Ms Smith has made, I find it not too difficult to stretch my imagination to a plausible sort of this is a development that's acceptable in principle. The bit that does concern me, I have to say more, is the scale, massing, height, and particularly dominance of that ridge line going all the way across, rather than necessarily the floor space within the site per se. That's the bit that instinctively makes me wince a bit in terms of its visual appearance, bluntly, not the environmental benefit side. Yeah, that's very laudable, but that bit. So you do have, I hate to say, numerous options here in terms of how you take this one forward. You could agree with the officer recommendation and refuse it on 2 grounds. You could refuse it on a single ground. You could give me authority to negotiate with a bit of direction as to where that might be. You could just approve it. You could, and I'm not suggesting you do, advocate you go and have a tour around the site. The chair's never hugely keen on site visits, but to get that visual bit yourself, although I am interested in Ms Smith's answer to Councillor Adams's earlier question almost about the landscape and visual impact assessment and how far that scale of development was put by the applicant into context within the key viewing points in that part of the district, which I have to say I've got less local knowledge of, so have less clarity in my head on. But personal view, it's the height and the dominance of that ridge that particularly concern me from a planning perspective.
Might I ask if you're suggesting that a deferral to review this?
No, I'm not particularly suggesting anything in this, but
I just want to clarify that.
I mean, if you want to defer it, then fine, but I would want to know why, in effect, because just deferring it without a clarity as to what you expect to happen next is pointless in inverted commas. I'm not saying you were suggesting it in that, because if it's deferred with a reason and something to do, then fine, but unless it's get that landscape and visual stuff, which we could work with the applicant on, so you get it from some key vantage points, or unless is there a potential for redesigning it so it's less dominant. Both of those would be valid reasons, Chair, but I wouldn't just defer it.
Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. I see this is finely balanced. I can't get past the mass of it. I'm afraid I can see that this has some benefits. I can't quite see the live-in imperative on this, and I have too much on the mass against the benefits that I can't. I think to work on the size of it would be a very good idea. Thank you.
First person.
I can't believe I'm going to suggest this, but can I suggest a deferral so we can have information on how it sits in the landscape?
Would that include a potential for a redesign to reduce the?
Well, I can't see the necessity of the storage up in the roof, and if you had your living vaulted, I wonder how much you could actually reduce that ridge line down. Would be my thoughts on it.
Okay, so you are proposing deferrals to enable further review and
Yeah,
landscape.
yeah. So we can see how it fits in the landscape and whether the ridge line can come down a bit. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Councillor Brown.
Well, I just want to commend the applicants for making such a valiant effort to rejuvenate what has been described as an eyesore not too far from the village of Bodham. So, and I'm, very intrigued by the application, and like Councillor Holiday, my only slight concern is about the height of that ridge line. I'm not sure whether it's essential to have living accommodation to the whole extent of the ground floor, or whether, the same ridge line could be maintained if it was modified. I know it's not in front of us today, to only part of that length. To give it some context, if you look at that door, it's going to increase in height by twice the height of that door almost. So it's a significant increase in height of ridgeline. But I'm not sure, would a landscape impact assessment, for example, come forward and say, if we condition additional camouflaging with trees and shrubbery, etc., to even if the ridge line was maintained at this height, it wouldn't appear visually from a distance to be as high if it was better camouflaged. I don't know if that's been considered, but I know that the officer has presented very clearly today, and I thank her for that. And the report is very good. I'm not sure whether, with the lack of a 5-year land supply, additional living accommodation adds a slightly, beneficial additional element to this. And I'm sitting here asking myself, would SS1 policy, as applicable to this site, allow the dwelling and the business premises to be separated if that's a route that the applicant chose to go down as an alternative, or would SS1 be strictly applied so that a separate dwelling as opposed to one above the business would not be considered at all in principle?
Well, if I can go first, then Mr. Lyon might chip in. I mean, to me, I think we're probably at a point where the committee almost, I think, is ready to make a decision in that regard. I would caution against designing by committee if we could change this and change that. I think officers have heard the direction of travel if you go a certain route, as has the applicant realistically in that regard, which to me is about three things. Okay, I'll just summarize where I think the mood of the meeting is. Clearly it's for you to vote. Number one is comfortable with the use mix proposed and the importance of redeveloping the site and all the environmental credentials that have been put forward, but fundamentally concerned about the height, scale and sort of length of the ridgeline perspective, and sort of seeking a mix of two things. One is a demonstration, better than we've achieved today, as to how visible that is or isn't in the wider environment. And secondly, some investigation as to how you could, if not reduce the quantum of floor space, then certainly break up that ridge line, reduce it in height, reduce it in length, etc. So that would be, if you defer it, those would be the three messages I think we would need to be working towards with the applicant. And again, a little bit like the last debate, I would rather there was a time limit set of, aiming to report this back in August rather than drag it on for months and months. I think we do need to draw a line under it and make a decision over the summer rather than us spend forever inching it in millimetre here and a millimetre there. But I think we've got the message, and design is a challenge, and I don't think that's the job for today in that regard. It's just a direction bit.
Thank you for that. I think that sums up my views as well. Do we need further debate? We have a proposal for deferral for all the reasons that. Yes, go ahead.
I asked earlier on whether there'd been a landscape visual impact assessment, or sorry, a request for one. I'd asked whether that one had been requested. But I did want to stress, I'm not sure what we'll learn from it. I mean, I'm honestly not even sure you'd see this very clearly from the top of the wind turbine, let alone many other visual points around it. It is really quite low down, but I accept that members might not be familiar with that. So can I just ask, what are we hoping very clearly to gain from this deferral?
I think as I read it, I think what we're looking to gain is a building that has an appropriate scale to the site. I think that's what we're aiming to get. Obviously, well, I mean, there's a difference of opinion, isn't there, in terms of whether a 9.9 height dwelling is an appropriate scale for the site when you compare to what's on the site already. So, I mean, you can get a landscape visual impact assessment completed that says it's not going to have an impact, and then committee may say a 9.9 metre high building is appropriate, but we don't have that. Obviously, advice would be to secure a lower height to that building. But clearly, if it's committee's decision that you're happy with a 9.9 metre high building, provided there's no landscape visual impact, then that's a judgment for you, isn't it? But we as officers are suggesting that that we should be securing a lower scale building here, because it is very tall. There's no getting away from that. If it's on a flat level, it is a tall building. You can't say it's not tall building when you compare to what's on the site already.
Just for context, how would the height and massing compare with, say, a typical grain barn? I'm sure you can answer that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking. I think it would be like anything built in the 70s. It would be bigger than. Maybe I've got something late 80s that might just be above it, but that's what we made. 9.9 meters is big building.
Thank you. I'm going to stop us there because we could be going on for a very long time. Right, we have in front of us a proposal to defer to enable further discussions on landscaping and particular height bulk and massing of the building. If that goes through, it is deferred. If that falls, we return to the officer recommendation. If that falls, then I can then take a proposal to accept it. So that's the process, just so you're clear where we are. Actually, we're all voting as the way we see fit, appropriate. So the proposal by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Fitch-Tillett, is to defer for the reasons we have discussed and has been explained by Mr. Williams. Can we take a vote on that, please?
Councillor Adams,
Against.
Councillor Brown,
For.
Councillor Fisher,
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Hankins. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Netherway. I have an abstention from Councillor Ringer. Councillor Kay Toy. For. Councillor Varley. Councillor Bayes. I have 8 for, 4 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you. So the application is deferred, hopefully to be brought back to the August meeting.
Can I, if anybody wants to come to Bodham, let me know. I will show you the site. And if you don't want to, go on Street View on Google and you'll see that it sits very sensitively, but you can do that in your own time.
I'll remind you that we do have a procedure for site visits and they shouldn't, while members can do what they like informally, there is a process that should be followed. Thank you. Right, we're late unexpected. We'll take a 15-minute break now. So apologies, Councillor Cushion, that we keep you waiting longer, but 15 minutes. Yeah.
10 past by that one.
Yeah. A bit later by my watch and a bit later by that. Actually, that was what it was. Okay, reconvening now at 11:10. And we move to the next one. Oh, interesting. Item 10, Fakenham, PF/24/2184.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members. So by way of a verbal update, since the agenda was last published, the applicant has requested a viability report was circulated to members. Democratic Services circulated this on Tuesday, the 24th of June, 2025. And in terms of an update to the published officer report for members, we have received 2 more letters of support. These raise similar matters that were received in previous representations of support, as set out on page 71 of the agenda. And having remeasured the distance from the application site to the designated town centre, it is approximately 1.9 kilometres as the crow flies, as opposed to 1.2 kilometres, which is stated on the officer report. So yeah, I'm presenting application PF24/2184, which proposes the erection of 2 buildings for use as a restaurant and a farm shop, and the associated development, including a separate WC and bar, 2 polytunnels, car parking, paths and access at Salmons Lane. So we now move to the general location plan. So the red cross is the approximate location of the application site in relation to Fakenham's designated town centre. As I've just mentioned, this is approximately 1.9 kilometres. And then the next slide is the general location plan. So this shows the area designated as countryside for the purposes of the core strategy. And then this is the site location plan. So the application site lies to the north of Fakenham, north of the A148 bypass. The application address refers to Salmons Lane, but I'm going to refer to it as Thorpeland Road for the purposes of this presentation. So Thorpeland Road lies to the east of the application site and heads to the north from the A148, A1067 roundabout. And I've labelled the A148 towards Cromer to the east for members and Kings Lynn to the west, as well as the A1067 Clipbush Lane to the south. So this is an aerial photo for further site context for members, and it highlights the key access roads labelled for further context. We've got Thorpeland Lodge Farm situated to the north of the site, and you can see the site is adjoined by agricultural fields, and there are a cluster of dwellings situated to the north. The site is located within the rolling open farmland landscape type as defined in the North Norfolk Landscape Character Assessment. So here we've got the existing site plan. This just shows that there's no existing permanent structures on the site. And then this is the proposed site plan, which highlights the different elements of the proposed scheme. So I'll just quickly run through these from the top in clockwise. So we've got the bar and ice cream area. We've got the WCs, the bins, loading bay, kitchen, staff parking, the farm shop, cycle parking, EV charging, visitor parking, polytunnels, overflow parking, and then an additional hedgerow is shown to the south and west of the polytunnels, and it is confirmed that no hedgerow will be removed. And then there's some new trees proposed, as well as the restaurant and a playground. So this site just shows the land that's going to be remaining in agricultural use, and then the change of use to Class E in blue. So here we've got the proposed elevations. So the restaurant would comprise of timber frame clad with dark stained timber and a corrugated steel roof, with roof lights on the northern elevation. Black solar panels are proposed on the south facing roof of the restaurant, and the bar and toilets comprise of galvanised corrugated steel grain silos, and there are painted steel shipping containers proposed for on-site storage between the barns and to the rear. So we've now got the proposed floor plan for the restaurant and the shop. And then this is the proposed floor plan for the WC and bar. Here's the proposed roof plan. And this slide shows a proposed visualisation of the scheme. I'll now go through some site photos. The blue dot in the corner on the location plan just shows an indicative location for members where I'm stood. So this is looking north. And then the next one is looking east. Then we've got looking southeast. looking south, looking west, looking northwest, and then looking south towards the access point to Thorpeland Road. And then this is the site access to Thorpeland Road. And then we've got looking south and looking north onto Thorpeland Road. So yeah, the main issues are set out as below. The main areas of policy conflict rise with the principle of development and the location's sustainability and impact on the highway network. So officers do acknowledge that the proposed development would deliver some economic benefits. Core strategy policy EC1 is supportive in principle of proposals for development in the countryside for the purposes of farm diversification, but this is subject to its criteria being met. This also includes the requirement that the proposed floor space is less than 250 square metres. Paragraph 88 of the NPPF indicates that decisions should enable the diversification of agricultural and other land-based rural businesses to support a prosperous rural economy. In this case, however, it is considered that the proposed development would clearly go beyond the scale of development envisaged by policy EC1. The scale of proposed development is considered to be excessive by officers, and the need for development has not been adequately justified, with the viability evidence submitted suggesting that the farm is currently profitable. So in this regard, the proposal would introduce a new destination in a countryside location that is contrary to the sequential approach to the location of such development required by CS policy EC5. So overall, this would result in an unsustainable form of development where sustainable modes of transport, such as walking and cycling, cannot be accessed nor improved, such that the vast majority of trips would be made by the car. The proposed development overall, if we just turn to the last page, is refusal. It would be in conflict with policy EC1 of the core strategy, and give rise to accessibility concerns as set out within policies SS1, SS2 and CT5 of the core strategy, as well as paras 115, 116 and 117 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Thank you.
We have three speakers together. If I can start with Angela Lynn from the Town Council, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you very much for your time today. We discussed this planning application at full council on Wednesday evening, and we unanimously support the application. We feel that the technical objections from officers shouldn't be allowed to get in the way of a development which, as Christopher Cushing has stated, will assist the local economy, both agricultural and tourist. It will also provide Fakenham with opportunities for extra business, extra visitors and extra jobs. And we believe that farm diversification is to be encouraged because we know that farmers are all under the cosh a bit at the moment. There have been recent successes of three other local farm businesses: the Meadows Farm Shop in Sculthorpe, Algie's Farm Shop at Bintree, and the Goat Shed in Honingham. The latter received a considerable sum of public money to undergo significant improvement. If planning is granted for the Fat Cow Farm Shop and Cafe, it will provide year-round service to customers and year-round employment to an area already beset with problems caused by short-term seasonal job offerings. It will be a welcome opportunity for drivers to take a break on a road with few informal places to stop. The new roundabout on the A148 has been provided to afford access to the northern development, where 950 new homes will be built. So although the town centre is 1.9 kilometres away, the town is actually expanding towards the Fat Cow site. Fakenham itself is not low on numbers of places to eat fast food. We're soon to get a McDonald's, we're soon to get a Greggs and a Burger King. The town council would welcome a quality development in the area, and we would support the application strongly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no objecting speakers. I have one supporting speaker, Jack Spencer Ashworth.
Good morning. We are a family-run arable and livestock farm located just to the north of Fakenham. The fourth generation to farm the land, we consider ourselves stewards of a lovely corner of North Norfolk. As I'm sure you're aware, farming is in a dire situation at the current time. Producing the nation's food does not yield a reliable income. We find ourselves in a perfect storm of high input costs, low market prices, and the complete withdrawal of the vital subsidies that have made farming a viable proposition. To survive, we've been encouraged by successive governments to diversify our revenue. We have done just that. For the past 5 summers, we have operated a pop-up venue known as Fat Cow, selling quality burgers, ice cream, and craft beer. As well as our own beef, we use local produce wherever possible, beer from Malt Coast near Wells, bacon from Graves in Bristol, and Mrs. Temple's famous cheese, to name a few. The delicious food and the wildflower meadow setting have proven hugely popular both with the locals and holidaymakers. Fat Cow has become a well-known and beloved destination, considered one of the best places to eat in the UK in 2023 by The Guardian. This success story has been a lifeline for the farm, but the predictions for the years ahead are dire. Despite this successful diversification, we will be loss-making within 2 years unless we significantly expand our non-farming revenue. The modest proposals before you look to provide a permanent base for Fat Cow as well as a small farm shop. A longer season and the shop will not only provide financial security, but also enable us to diversify into other produce, be it salad grown in the polytunnels or fresh produce sold in the shop. But these proposals won't just benefit us. We will also be selling produce from other local farms and artisan producers. We already employ 4 seasonal staff, but this would expand to at least 6 permanent and 3 part-time employees, plus additional maintenance and cleaning contracts. By recommending that you refuse this application, planners have disregarded government policy and the local plan, which both clearly support agricultural diversifications, something our proposal so demonstrably is. We have provided the data to show that the income from this project will support our wider farm business, and without this, it will fail. They are concerned that permission may allow an unrestricted Class E development. This is not our intention, and to allay these fears, we have suggested conditions that would restrict the use to a restaurant and farm shop, with at least 70% of the produce coming from Norfolk. Highways complain that most trips will be made by car. It is obvious to us that diversifications are in rural settings and not in town centres. This is acknowledged in paragraph 110 of the NPPF and was not detrimental to numerous other farm shop applications in the district. Our site is well within cycling distance of a major town and less than 500 metres from the A148, an unusually sustainable location for farm diversification. I therefore urge members to consider the numerous positive benefits of this proposal: a long-term and diverse stream of income for our farm, local healthy produce for the community, a boost for the local economy, expansion of the tourist offer in our area, regular employment opportunities.
I have to stop you there, I'm afraid.
Future of a place loved by so many. I urge you to support this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cushing.
Right, thank you. This is the first time in my 6 years as a district councillor that I've called anything into the development committee. I say that because it's a decision that I don't take lightly, but I do feel really strongly that the planners have got it wrong on this occasion. As Mr. Spencer Ashworth had just said, they established this business opening during the summer in 2021, dipping their toe into the market and found it to be a tremendous success. Now, I admire anyone who's an entrepreneur, is putting their own money at their own risk in order to develop a business, small business, to get it off the ground. I would have hoped the planning department would have given that their full support. So I'm honestly bemused that they're not doing so. When I've heard the planning objections that we've heard this morning, I haven't heard anything in there that I think is anyway a showstopper. I know that the agents for the planning planners have submitted their own rebuttal to that based on policy conditions, based on the local ones and the NPPF, and there's plenty in there that counters what they actually say this morning, and I'll make some reference to those as we go through. I'm not sure whether that's been circulated to you or not, but anyway, there's plenty of basis in there for approving the planning application. Whatever political persuasion we might be, we all want to see North Norfolk flourish. Small businesses like this are the very foundation of our economy. I'm really pleased that the council's economic development team has given strong support for the application. As mentioned in your papers, Stuart Daminsinger says it is part of a wider business strategy that will not only support the sustainability and economic growth of the applicant's business, but it'll also contribute to North Norfolk visitor economy. Earlier this year, the economic development team produced this booklet that we've all received a copy of. It says on the front there, nurturing growth and creating opportunity. This is the very essence of that. There are really compelling reasons to support the application. As mentioned, it boosts the rural economy, and that complies with SS1, policy condition SS1. It is an extension of the farm business that complies with SS2, supports farm diversification at a time when farming's never been under the pressure that it's been at the moment. And that's what paragraphs 88, 89 and 110 of the MPPF provide additional employment in the area and provide good locally sourced food and give residents, children and tourists more local hospitality and recreational options. There's one objection which really cries out to be addressed, and that's cited as a CT6, which say it cannot be easily accessed by pedestrians and cyclists. If you retrospectively applied that condition to the rural facilities we've got in North Norfolk, most of them would have to close down. I mean, absolute nonsense. There is huge support for this in Fakenham. If you look on social media, it's all over there. I've had people unbidden writing to me, offering their support. We have town council, have local county councillor Tom Fitzpatrick as well. One of the residents that wrote to me on Tuesday, and he said this, I thought the idea was to encourage small businesses to promote development and not stifle the concept. Well, that's in one sentence, I think summarises it really adequately. There's another point also made on our social media, which is this. People want to know why it is that the District Council is happy to approve a planning application for McDonald's, but objects to the local guy up the road. As Councillor Glynn has mentioned, also we've had approval for a Greggs and a Burger King that came through, believe it or not, 10 o'clock last night. Now, I've got no objection to either any of those, I have to actually say, to be fair to it, but we've got McDonald's, which really is the exemplar of mass-produced processed food, probably delivered from miles away, whereas we've got an applicant here who's locally produced food free of preservatives. I have to say that's an optic I do think this council, this committee really ought to take into consideration. I know, and I used to sit on this committee, so I know when you're looking at this, you based on planning conditions, both NPPF and local development framework. You can argue these things either way. The value of this committee is that you stand back and you make decisions based on what is the greater good. And I believe strongly that good can only come from approval of this application. Good for the survival and growth of the applicant's business, good for the local economy and other businesses that supply this enterprise, good for the local people that it will employ, and finally good for all the residents who will actually get the opportunity to use this. Please vote against the office recommendation, support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cushing. I have to say I'm struggling a bit with the recommendation. That's the person.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm also struggling with the officer recommendation. I myself, as you know, am a fourth generation farmer and very much have diversified to survive. And in the current climate we're faced with, it is essential. I see in the report about the scale and mass. Well, show me a farm shop that hasn't then gone and built a cafe on the side of it. That's what people want to go and do. They want to go out and eat and drink. So you know, you scale it back, put a farm shop in and then come back later and say you want a cafe, whereas this is all just getting sorted at the same time. The 16 supporting comments, I didn't see any objections. I thought national planning policy supported farmers diversifying and therefore the SS1 policy wouldn't apply. I encourage the jobs it's going to create. I also think there's an element of social engineering here. Do we want a patchwork of farming families in North Norfolk, or are we going to have sort of faceless corporations just farming our landscape? And, you know, this allows farmers to carry on farming, probably subsidising food production, which is wrong, but carry on farming and operate within our landscape. And I thought the comment was quite right about the town, about how far away it is from town. Well, town is actually going to come and meet this site pretty quickly by the looks of it. So yeah, I think I'm not in support of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think this is a fantastic and good, honest business as it is, and I think the extension represents a possibility of a really good offer for the west of our district, both to residents and indeed visitors, and a rural family-owned business. And I think we recognise that perhaps as a starting point. Once again, on a somewhat thematic day, we live in a rural area, and a lot of our economic activity is therefore going to be in the countryside. And if you look at farmers' publications and look at what the government had to say, farmers are encouraged to seek diversification, yet seemingly face an absolute minefield when it comes to the many different perspectives on what is acceptable. And that's not, I think, the fault of the planners. And I should stress, I think then there needs to be a greater understanding of that nationally quite urgently. Diversification is diverse, and so it should be. It needs to attract different customers. So it's reflected on today's agenda, of course, but we've seen it before with commercial, sports, leisure, holiday industry, diversification previously, neither of which are reflected in farms that the farms own produce, but we have supported. And I'd question that too. You know, I don't know where that would leave, say, the farmer that produces just cereal crops or something, where it would be a complicated diversification if we were to restrict them that heavily. I think we've got to reflect that in the current context, farmers need to work outside of the box to survive, and we must also recognise that by the nature these developments are going to be slightly away from main roads and public transport, but a business has existed here for some time without issues, and as I think previous councillor alluded to, there will be a development of the town, which will see it grow. So it's such that I think the constraints there are outweighed by the benefits of development. Lastly, can we just have the elevations on the screen again? Would that be a possibility?
It's possible. Can we?
Yeah, so I just wanted to reflect on the thought that I thought that was I really like the design of the buildings, and I just thought it was a really quite ingenious and pleasing approach there, which you might not have had across many different applications that might be considered similar. So I thought that was quite good. So I feel we should be looking at conditional approval subject to relevant restrictions. So I won't be supporting the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Ringer.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just drill down a little bit into some of the highways response. And, you know, I have a bit of a reservation about the accessibility for sort of pedestrians and cyclists to this site. And I think it's the highway's reluctance to provide any funding towards anything like even an uncontrolled crossing with sort of a refuge on that roundabout, so that people from Fakenham can actually walk or cycle, not just to this place, but anywhere to the north of the town, is really quite lacking. And that, although this is not perhaps relevant to this application entirely, I think that highways and this council, perhaps in any future developments in Fakenham, really ought to try and get some money towards improvement for pedestrian crossing at that particular point. But that is sort of as an aside. I wouldn't want that particular issue to stop this application. I think it's really positive for the town. As I say, it's my reservation is just that its proximity to the town is welcome, but that also means that people will inevitably try and walk and cycle to it and perhaps get themselves into dangerous position on that roundabout. So that would be my my one reservation, but I'm tended to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayes.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said already, but there's a couple of other points I think are relevant. Being a chef and obviously a teacher, I think it's really important that we educate people about crops, where they come from, when they're grown, and when you should be buying them in season. I think this, from what I've seen, will certainly do that. I also feel that we've got a farm shop, Meals, on the A149. It's got cycle paths and it's got walkways. I can assure you that very few people use them to go to Meals. So I think I can't quite understand that. I think it's a wish, but I don't think it's necessary in this case. I've clearly, I think probably others have watched Clarkson recently. There's clearly an opportunity to sell local produce, and I think that's vital, where this application is talking about selling 70% of the local of what he sells through that shop will be local produce. And I think that should be endorsed and supported.
Thank you. Councillor Hankins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hugely supportive of this farm diversification project. And the reason is that this farm, like many farms, is in a very difficult predicament in that they're not big enough to take advantage of major scale, but too small to survive. There is no doubt the applicant has provided a viability report which was circulated to all members. There's no doubt that without some kind of diversification, this farm will fail. It is not viable as a family business of this size. So some kind of diversification is absolutely essential. The proposal put forward goes some way to preventing that from happening. However, I personally think that the actual business plan and the rationale could be improved in way of highlighting farm food, the relationship between the shop and the provision of farm good food, etc. That could help enormously. And apart from that, I think it ticks all the boxes. There is some issue about access. I mean, this is a farm shop. It's very unlikely that they will have the huge pedestrian business. This will be, which I would think would come off the bypass as part of a tourist attraction. So I really would like members to look again at this. This is an all or nothing situation in terms of this farm. It's as simple as that. It just will not survive, having had all of the support taken away from it. It is now dependent on a farm business which is not at this stage viable. So I commend this project to the members. However, I do think that there could be some improvement in the way in which both the plan, the viability plan, have been presented. But I don't, notwithstanding that, I really strongly believe this should be accepted.
Okay, I have three further speakers, and I think we'll have to go through the usual procedure. Get to where we sense we all wish to go. Councillor Toy.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say thank you to the applicant, who I felt was very passionate about succeeding and keeping his family farm going in the future. And also commending farmers that are going down that diversity route. And I think it's up to us as a rural county and all over the country is to support farmers wherever we can, because they will not survive. And as mentioned, it will get taken over by big companies that are perhaps not so passionate to how they produce the meat or the crops. And I think this is yet another lovely place for people to go and understand where the produce comes from, especially children. It's very easy to go to Burger King or McDonald's and you just order, pay and grab and eat. But this is an experience. It is a different experience and educational for some people. So I'm fully in support of this, and plus I love a really good burger and I love ice cream. So let's just get on with it.
Councillor Brown, briefly, please.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. Actually, Councillor Toy's just mentioned what I was going to say, that you know, we have a duty in this district to support our farmers and agriculture generally. I think, you know, our core strategy is nearly 20 years old. I'm afraid under requirements, and I fully understand why the officer has prepared the report in the manner that they have. It's because it follows our core strategy, and I would urge people to support the emerging local plan and getting that through when it comes to full council, so that we can wave the core strategy goodbye. I just wanted to ask something technical, and that was, I think, Councillor Cushing in his very eloquent address and along with other speakers this morning mentioned that there isn't an equivalent of, is it policy C1 in the emerging local plan? Can I just ask the development manager whether, or the assistant director, if they can add a little bit of clarity to that? And subject to that, I am quite prepared to support this application and go against the officer's recommendation.
So on that point and that point alone, I know Mr. Lyon wants to comment more generally. Councillor Cushing has done his homework very well and is correct in that regard. There is no comparable policy in the emerging plan. Having said that, I will go a step further than that and say SS1 and SS2 remain roughly the same as current, focusing development more towards the urban area, and the omission of the EC1 equivalent, I don't think necessarily, personal view here, provides a great deal of clarity as to how this council will deal with, if I call it farm diversification as a generality going forward, which is probably something separately to this we need to give a bit of thought to. But in answer to your question, Councillor Cushing was right.
Okay. I mean, I'm sensing the mood in the room, not really on this one. So, I mean, we've written the report in the way we had it, as Councillor Brown has said, we've written it reflecting the policies of the development plan. So our guidance to you as always as officers is that you should follow your development plan unless there are material considerations that indicate otherwise. And those material considerations would include things like the NPPF, which is say paragraph 88 does encourage diversification of farming. I mean, that being said, we've raised some concerns about the accessibility. Yes, you could say it's not that far away from Fakenham, but actually it's quite inaccessible on foot and on cycle. I wouldn't, as Councillor Ring has quite rightly pointed out, I think there are concerns about pedestrians from those 950 houses that are going to be built quite close by being tempted to try and get to the site on foot, and that could lead to concerns about pedestrian safety. Now, clearly it's not viable for the applicant to provide a contribution towards enhancing that roundabout. I mean, clearly it's a matter for the county council and any future government council that's responsible for highways to consider, are there opportunities to enhance that roundabout? Obviously I was involved in the 950 dwelling scheme nearby, and I did look to check whether there are any off-site highway works proposed as part of that scheme. Although there are some, there are none proposed for that particular roundabout. I think the applicant, in pushing back on that, said, well, there's no development going on in that north of Falkland Road, so they weren't predicting any kind of need for pedestrians to go out in that direction. So really, that's really why we've sort of raised some concerns about highway matters. But if obviously members were to go against officer advice, I suppose it's a question then of how do you ensure that any planning permission you grant doesn't metamorphose into something else? Now, by that I mean, if the applicant gets planning permission, they could, if they choose, sell that development to somebody else, and you might then end up with a scheme that perhaps wasn't in your mind today about a farm diversification that's supporting local businesses. So it's how would you control that so that it doesn't metamorphose into another McDonald's or another national pub chain or somebody else that might not deliver those local benefits that you as members are giving weight to today. And in terms of the farm shop, we always have difficulty with farm shops in terms of conditioning. How do you control the types of goods that a farm shop sells? Now, there are past cases I can think of where we've sort of set out I think 70-mile radius seems to be the typical distance that people talk about for the local produce. I mean, that's quite a long way, but I suppose it's from one side of Norfolk to the other. But so yeah, it's how would you, if you were minded to approve it, how would you seek to control that so that we can get a positive benefit of supporting the local economy, but in a way that can't then metamorphose into something else? Because the last thing we would want is a mainstream retailer moving into here or a mainstream pub moving into here that doesn't deliver those benefits that you would be accruing weight to today. But I think I've probably said enough. I don't know if Russell wants to add anything more, but
Can I just add two bits just to pick up on Mr. Lyon's last point? So if and clearly the mood music is that you might you take a different view than the recommendation, I would strongly encourage some conditions, the normal stuff, but equally something covering the issue that Mr. Lyon has mentioned. Having said that, the applicant in his presentation suggested 2 or 3 bits in that territory, which to me are in the ballpark of being about right if this were to be approved. The additional bit I personally think it would be helpful to do is to provide a long-term link between this site and the main farm in that guise, so they can't end up in different ownership by accident, or whatever the word I should use there is, in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, without this council having another bite at the cherry in terms of stuff. And that might be more in the bounds of a legal agreement, that part, rather than anything else, because I think the public benefit, the pros you're adding in are all about the farm diversification and the support of the sector, rather than about a new food servery on the outskirts of Fakenham kind of thing. I'm not meaning that positively or negatively, but Mr. Lyon is right. Your talk is not about allowing a national pub chain that has a little bit of a corner shop in the corner of it to that side. It's about something that is bespoke. And Councillor Adams raised a good point I thought about. Actually, it's quite an interesting design in that regard. Clearly, it doesn't look like a national pub chain, but you probably don't want it to become one either. And there would be the normal array of conditions. So if you go against, I'd advocate you give me the authority, as you would normally do, to sort it all out.
And you're happy that you could provide an appropriate set of conditions in that case?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure we need to have long the debate, but I do have Councillor Varley who hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My thanks, first of all, to the case officer for the report this morning, and also to the public speakers as well. As I've said before, I just think it's really important to have that local knowledge, and it's quite clear that very passionate about their business. And I think that has actually aided to the discussion this morning. Obviously, it is very trying times for our farmers, and as a rural district council, we must ensure that we support and enable good rural diversification. And this application certainly will go towards that aspect. I mean, it's fantastic to see. It really is going to be a benefit to the western part of the district, but I really can see, because it's such a good business, it will encourage others from across the district to attend. And with that in mind, I think we really need to ensure that we encourage a more greener sense of tourism. And I did note the solar panels on the roof, but I would like to see, if possible, Mr. Chairman, if we can condition electric car charging points as well. Would that be possible?
I believe that's shown.
Oh, they are there already. Oh, so, well, I completely missed that. My apologies for that. Fantastic to see. In all senses then, I absolutely support this.
Okay, I don't think we need to debate much longer, unless you can add something new, councillor Fisher, in which case.
Yes, I've got something new. I'd like to propose the officer's recommendation.
Okay, you have to go through those procedures first. Constantly have to remind you of this. Did I? Oh, no. Okay. You are trying to move us forward, and it saves me doing it. Okay, I will second that in order to get us going. We can vote on that.
So for the avoidance of doubt here, you're voting for the officer's recommendation, which is to refuse the application. So if you want to refuse the application, it's for. If you want to do something other than refuse it, it's against, just because occasionally people have been known to say something they didn't quite mean here.
Yeah, so we still have another application to go. Okay, we should go to the vote.
Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
Forish.
Councillor Fictillion.
Against.
Councillor Hankins. Councillor Heinrich.
Against.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Patterson.
Against.
Councillor Netherway. Councillor Ringer.
Against.
Councillor Toy.
Against.
Councillor Varley. Councillor Bayes. So I have 1 for. 12 against.
Right, that as a recommendation has been lost. We therefore need a proposer and seconder. You can, where should we start? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to propose this for approval. Is that?
Yeah, so we could do with some reasons for approval.
Oh, because I don't believe policy SS1 should apply because it's a farmer diversifying as supported in the national planning framework, and for the economic benefits. I do think a condition that it's part of the farming business would be sensible. But that's been discussed and can be conditioned.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Adams. Thank you. You can, yes.
I suggest a nuance on that. So you're saying, obviously, the second part of the reason for refusal talks about the scale of development. The committee are in effect saying they've recognised that it's above the policy requirements, but the public benefits or the benefits of the scheme would outweigh that conflict with that policy. So you're.
Yes, and I believe in time it would get there anyway, because everybody who has a farm shop puts a cafe on eventually. So I think we might as well just get it all done in one hit.
So the recommendation effectively that Councillor Patterson is proposing, I believe, is to give me the authority to issue the permission with appropriate conditions and possibly a Section 106 agreement, and those conditions to include an appropriate link to the farm and diversification associated with the farm. Yep. Councillor Holiday's man.
And some sort of element around the design. We felt that the design was quite, not to have the design changed. Was that not brought up in discussion? Is that possible?
Well, we'll certainly control it to the design that was put forward within the application with, and apologies, I don't know the detail here, so apologies to the couple at the back. If the materials weren't specified, then we put on a condition that requires agreement of the materials. If they were specified and we were comfortable with them, then we wouldn't need that condition.
But this would be ongoing rather than so that someone said that they wanted to turn into a pub chain so that the design would remain.
Well, if for sake of argument, in X years' time, there was a proposal for it to become part of a national pub chain, and assuming that required some change that required a separate planning application, i.e., I take it to an extreme here, they wanted to knock it down and build something that looks like their standard type, then that would be before you again, or successors entitled, subject to whatever a national scheme of delegation might say at the time. So we will tie it down to be the bespoke design that is proposed here.
Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
Abstain.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Hankins. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Netherway. Councillor Ringer.
For.
Councillor Toy. For. Councillor Varley. Councillor Bayes. That's 12 with 1 abstention.
Okay, the application is approved, subject to discussions on conditions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just take a comfort break, please?
You may. Do not take too long. We don't wish to be here beyond 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. This application is for the installation of 10 sheds on temporary garden plots. It was called to committee today by the Development Manager to ensure transparency in the process of determination. Just to confirm as well, page 85 of your agenda says that no comments were received at the time of writing. There is a small update to that just to say that Cromer Town Council have submitted a statement of no comment. So this slide shows the location plan, and you can see Davies Hill and Holt Road highlighted in yellow, and the site is edged in red. This is the site plan. You can see the proposed siting for each of the garden sheds. You will see in the following photographs that are already some allotment paraphernalia on the site, just to confirm that these are in addition to what's already there. So this is a view of the site from the north, looking onto the allotments. This shows a view of the site from the east. You can see the existing tree line that divides the site between Davies Lane and where the site is. So that's the shielding between that road. This slide shows the site from the south, and you can see the existing access to the allotments. That does provide vehicular access for parking as well. And this slide shows the site from the west, and in this one you can see the mature hedgerow that provides shielding from the crematorium car park. This slide shows the specifications and design of the shed, so you can see what they would look like. The key issues of the proposal are the principle of development. The site is within the countryside, but policy SS2 does support development for recreational use. In terms of impact on the character of the area and the design, the small scale of the proposal means that it's considered to be policy compliant. It's not going to have a lot of impact. There's not much visibility to it. In terms of amenity, it's a good distance from any other building, really. So there's no concern that it'd have any detrimental impacts. In terms of landscape, the existing hedgerow and trees are considered to provide sufficient containment of the site and would not adversely impact the Norfolk Coast National Landscape. And the proposal is also not anticipated to alter the existing parking provisions or increase the amount of traffic to the site. So it is considered to comply with policy in that respect as well. The recommendation is therefore for approval, subject to conditions regarding time, development in accordance with approved plans and the materials. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one speaker only. That's Jane Wisson from the Town Council. Please, that's what I've registered. You're speaking instead. Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Fitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm quite happy to propose that this is approved.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a proposer and seconder. If there's no further debate, we go to a vote. If you wish to speak, Councillor Fisher. Love the attitude,
Councillor Adams.
I think as I said at the meeting, I better abstain.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Hankins. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Netherway.
For.
Councillor Ringer.
For.
Councillor Toy. For. Councillor Varley. Councillor Bayes.
For.
It's 12 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Application is approved. Somebody find Russell, please. Okay, Mr. Williams returns. We'll deal with agenda item 12. There's an update on various government consultations and our responses. Right, over to you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. As it's 12:05, I won't talk for an hour on this one. So you may recall that the government are endeavouring to reform the planning system, and from time to time they publish a batch of consultation papers, and effectively this is the second batch that this report refers to. They publish 4 papers which are all summarised or referred to on paragraph 1.1 of your paper, but most of this report focuses on the paper that relates to the national scheme of delegation that the government are proposing to introduce. Earlier in the year, we commented on their original concept, and our thoughts are set out in Appendix 2 to your paper, but the government have decided that they wish to get on with introducing a national scheme of delegation. So this paper is written in the spirit of a perspective that we're not going to change their mind. So we might as well comment on what they have actually proposed and make a limited number of points, which, to be perfectly honest, I'm not necessarily expecting to result in changes, if I'm honest, but that I think are pertinent to this council and in many ways planning at smaller district councils more generally, and indeed for many other authorities. So I've tried to summarise their main suggestions in paragraph 2.1, and then in paragraph 2.3, the main points, I think, of where we should be. But just to summarise, their current consultations suggest there should be two different types of planning applications, effectively Tier A and Tier B, they call it. Tier A, the way of reading it would be those have to be determined by officers. So you wouldn't be able as councillors to consider them at committee, and bluntly, that would have included all the applications you've considered today as a starting point. Okay, so that's part one. Part two is a bunch of applications where they would also be determined by officers, and I'm just going to use individuals here for a second, unless Councillor Heinrich and I both agree that they should come before committee. It is silent on what happens if Councillor Heinrich and I disagree. Clearly that won't happen because I'm departing, but somebody else might disagree with Councillor Heinrich at some point in the future. So I suppose the headline parts of the comments, and I've taken some input from Councillors Heinrich, Brown, Holiday, MacDonald, as previously discussed here in flavouring this paper, is crudely, there should always be discretion for something to come to committee. So as I'm sure you understand our constitution reasonably, it gives Steve Hems or me a chunk of ability to make decisions. But if I decide I don't want to, I can choose to report it here. Personally, I think that should continue because you can never quite predict what the issues are that might come up. And secondly, that there should be an arbiter in the event that Councillor Heinrich and I don't agree. And realistically, that has to be a role that the government would recognise. And in this instance, the suggestion is that that should be the portfolio holder with responsibility for planning as the third person in that regard. Plus, we're also suggesting that there should be a tier of applications that automatically come to committee. I make it up now, but we're not suggesting anything in particular. A housing scheme for more than 100 probably should come to committee automatically in every authority in the country. So Appendix 1 to your paper sets out the detailed comments that I'm suggesting you give me authority to submit. I'm not going to get defensive over them. If you want different bits in it, then so be it. And there is some stuff in the paper, mainly at paragraph 3.7, I think it is, as 2 or 3 comments on the other 3 papers, which are probably less relevant. And then the one other bit I would draw attention to is the government continue on their interest in dictating the size of development committees or planning committees, and are suggesting, I think if I remember correctly, that there should be between 7 and 11 people and setting a cap at 11. You're 14, but if the law says you can only have 11, then that's what it will be. Personally, I don't entirely follow the gist of that, but it is I suppose, a response to the fact that there are 1 or 2 councils who have planning committees of 20 plus, which does seem a little bit entertaining, shall we say. And then the other bit is they are solidly interested in you all having some kind of national planning accreditation by way of training before you can sit on a committee, and not leaving it to the likes of Mr. Lyon to vouch that you've had some local training. From my perspective, that's not completely daft. I should have thought of a better word than that, shouldn't I? But as a suggestion, but equally, for me, it's having a feel for what the North Norfolk policies are is actually equally as important as understanding what the NPPF might say or what the legal framework is. But that's probably all I wanted to say. Chair, and more than happy to answer questions or be told to change it a bit.
Carl, you were first.
Thank you. Just to, with regards to the committees in future, I'm just thinking about how that looks in LGR. And I'm only an occasional member of this committee, so apologies if everyone already knows the answer. But presumably there will be multiple development committees because there will be multiple local plans for areas. So how is that going to? Because or would we end up with one committee for one that covers everybody as part of whatever that unitary council might look like?
Yeah, no, interesting question. So I think there's a couple of bits. One, if the law is your committee can only be 11, say, then that would apply to unitary councils and any other kind of council that exists at the time. There are many councils who do have what they tend to call area committees. So, there might be the North Area Committee, the South Area Committee, and the writing from government is silent on whether you could have more than one. At one point, they were going to suggest you might have ones for really major stuff and ones for minor stuff. They seem to have dropped that. But equally, if you take a strict interpretation of their rules and their current tier A and B, you might not have that many applications ever coming to a North Norfolk District Council Development Committee. It might be half a dozen a year kind of thing. Multiply that by 7 authorities in Norfolk. Actually, it might be manageable within a single committee. Equally, this is more of an LGR point. If you were a councillor in Kings Lynn deciding on an application in Great Yarmouth, just to avoid North Norfolk completely, you might bring a degree of planning stuff to it, but you're not going to bring much by way of local feel or knowledge. And you could argue that's a good thing, but equally it's a disconnect from democracy in my view.
Tim.
Well, I just feel really frankly that the changes being proposed at the moment are outrageous. And just imagine that neither of the local members would have been able to call in today's applications, which I think would just be seen as economically counterproductive. I think it's wrong for the government to assume it's councillors just stifling growth and housing opportunity. I just it's just the wrong end of the stick. But what they're looking at doing is stifling local voice. And I suppose separately from how this is framed, I've also obviously got the concerns about the potential impacts of the changes around CPO and that the impacts that might have on farmers and landowners. So I would say, if anything, strengthen response where possible, because I think local councils need to stand up here and push back a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Very much a top-down proposal, is it not? We got any timescales? I mean, here we are. We know we're going to be here for another couple of years and perhaps one after that. But are we all going to be reorganised before that?
So the mood music from government on the national scheme of delegation is that they're aiming to get that in place this year. I have to say, I think that's, ignore whether it's the right thing or not, I think that's a very ambitious time frame, because they need to get the planning infrastructure bill to become an act, then they need to publish draft statutory instruments. So I think it's ambitious, but clearly it's one they are intent on getting on with. And if bluntly they miss the end of this year, that would imply it's bound to be in the first half of next year if they get their way at the latest. So this undoubtedly precedes LGR.
Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I spent more hours than I would have wanted to, sitting through the debates in Parliament on the Planning and Infrastructure Bill at the beginning of the month. And whatever we put in this response, and I thank the Assistant Director for consulting with us and my colleagues on this, it will probably not matter in the scheme of things. Those in Parliament that have a different view are struggling because the government control the scrutiny committees. An amendment after amendment was voted down quite substantially. No concerns about being in welfare bill territory at all on the planning and infrastructure bill. So unfortunately, it's coming to us, and it is sobering, as Councillor Adams has said, and the Assistant Director, that this morning none of these applications would have come to committee under this new scheme of delegation. We clearly don't have a problem in welcoming training because we already do that. Not every local authority does. And the record of this committee has proven that that is effective here in North Norfolk for our planning authority, and we all benefit as a result from that. I don't know whether this is a final draft, but I just wanted to correct a typo on page 97, which is a second paragraph up. It reads a good moment to current an anomaly. Well, I think that should be to correct an anomaly. So I don't know if that's going anywhere official, but if we could just amend that, please. And there was something, bullet point on page 91 at the very bottom of the page, a certificate of appropriate alternative development. Could somebody please enlighten me and make it a school day for me and tell me exactly what that is?
So if I comment on Councillor Brown's three observations. One, thank you for pointing out current and correct. You're correct.
Not current, correct. Thank you.
You were current at the moment you said it, but anyway, and on the certificate of appropriate alternative development, it's connected to the CPO system, and I did send you a link to the document and a page number, I don't think it was 91, as to where to find the detail.
I'll find
it. Only the last week. If anybody else wants the same link, you're very welcome, and I will send it to you. Can I just make two more points? One is a question, actually, in answer to Councillor Adams's suggestion of beefing it up a bit. It wouldn't be difficult, and we've got 2 or 3 weeks here, to write a introductory paragraph or 2 or 3 to circulate to the same councillors that, broadly speaking, reiterates the point of previously that we don't support the direction of travel as a council because of the democratic deficit. Now, points that you made today and others have made previously. So if you want me to add that in, I've got no problem with doing that. The other point is, I suppose, a personal reflection. So I'd be very cheeky here. You're quite understandably thinking of this from a democratic deficit perspective. Me sat here as your senior town planner is thinking of this from a professional perspective. Crudely, there are probably 1 or 2 decisions I'd rather just make. But equally, there are 3 or 4 I'd rather not just make, because to me, the Democratic Party is important. And not to rehash today's meeting, but bluntly, I or somebody working for me would probably have determined those 3 applications in accordance with the recommendations, because why wouldn't I have done if I've got that ability? And at times that might put me as an individual at serious conflict with individual councillors, groups of councillors. It's not a role personally that I would feel particularly professionally comfortable in doing. Where does the liability sit if I refuse something that you all think should have been approved? I'm not talking about popularity contests here, but you're not particularly going to be enamoured with that. What if it's then appealed and the council loses, reputationally damaging? What if it costs £100,000 worth of costs, kind of thing? So from a professional perspective, I'm personally quite uncomfortable of not having the common sense safety net of actually thinking that's one that's sensible to report to a committee structure. So I get the democratic deficit, but I think there's also the other side of the coin that personally I have as much trouble with as the democratic part. Anyway, but whether you want to beef up the start bit a la Councillor Adams's suggestion, I'm happy to, but I probably need a steer.
Just another thinking how this might work. I mean, we've had 3 of the 4 applications today which have come in recommended for refusal, which the local sort of residents have all supported and backed. Is this possibly inadvertently, you know, I know it's designed to streamline things, but could we end up with more applications like that, which just end up with the planning inspector, who then might be completely overwhelmed and under-resourced, and something that is streamlined could actually end up taking an awful lot longer anyway.
So the basic answer to that is yes, in the North Norfolk context. I think there is a fair chance, because I'm not meaning this positively or negatively, but factually, you know, here, I don't think in the last 2 years you've refused something we've recommended approval for. Okay, so therefore there won't be more appeals as a consequence from that bit, but equally you're approving 1 or 2 bits we have recommended. So yes, it might reduce the inspectorate's workload here. Sorry, it might increase it. Sorry, apologies. In other places, their primary concern is that councillors, in some instances, have a track record for refusing things, and they often go to appeal contrary to recommendation, and more often than not, they end up being overturned with big costs. I think on the national scale, it would probably reduce the inspectorate's workload. In the North Norfolk context, you might be an outlier.
I think I can see a further risk that a couple of years in, they'll decide that planning officers are not making the right decisions, so they'll set up some sort of Ofsted type inspectorate, which will cause yet more problems. So I certainly agree that we need to strengthen that introductory paragraph. Which,
Well, I'm considering bringing a motion to full council about this for the next full council meeting and discussion with cabinet about it, because I think we need, as a full member group, to discuss implications on this. That will probably be after the return date on this, won't it? What's the return date on this?
The return date on this is the 23rd of July. I hate to say I don't have full council dates imprinted in my memory.
I think it's coinciding, it may be the same day. Can you remind us, Phil?
Councillor Fisher probably knows, he's chairing it.
Yeah, I think it's the
Yeah,
23rd.
I thought it was the same day. Yeah, just off the top of my head.
But yeah, this is not my game, is it? But if there is a motion tabled for full council, then it wouldn't be difficult for me to include reference to the wording of the motion in the reply and fudge whether it's been agreed or not, because they won't take that much notice anyway. So I can write that in a.
Yeah. Yeah. Being worked on. Okay.
I think for me, it will be a question as to whether I stand for election ever again. Honestly, I don't, you know, I think that with the devolution elements, removing a lot of the strategic functions and considerations of local authorities, and I'm trying to say that, oh, don't worry, you'll be, you know, down in the grassroots dealing with things, but actually taking this away, I think the life of councillors moving forwards is looking incredibly bland, and I just don't think this is good at all. I think one thing we probably do need to think about, just in reverse, is focus minds on. I think today was a bit of a watershed moment. Actually, we had 3 applications in, all for support. You know, ignoring the town council allotments. Clearly there's a need for some, and there's a demand for some economic growth in the countryside, and maybe we need to look at where we've got some policy gaps, because if we slip into this process without having dealt with any of those, and then we're refusing applications that we actually want to see get through, I think it will leave us in a very challenging position. I'm not necessarily seeing the government say that we should do that and look at our planning policies as such, but they're making a fundamentally big change here. And it really will change the dynamic and expectations of a councillor, because you as members will have all had those requests from at some point because of maybe perhaps an application that isn't popular in your village or whatever. Can you do something about that? Well, actually, no, I don't have any voice on it anymore. But the instances we saw today were very good, because it demonstrates exactly the opposite. Councillors calling in applications to support economic development and on a small scale housing growth. So it's fundamentally a very big deal.
Any further comments?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm sorry, the reason I haven't responded to Councillor Adams is I don't have anything to add and I disagree with what he said. Just a variant on Councillor Holliday's point. Yes, anybody can comment, so can any town or parish council in that regard. And I wouldn't underestimate, and everywhere does it a bit different at the moment, which is one of the things the government are trying to crush out the system. But at the moment, the call-in bit gives town and parish councils a little bit more of a say in the process. We engage with you, if we're minded to make a different recommendation than the town and parish council position, in due course, their position will have no additional weight in anything getting anywhere near committee. So it does cut out that potential completely, which within our constitution sits there.
I suppose.
Yeah, sorry, with that information that's just come out, should we not share that and ensure that people are aware of that deadline date and make sure that parish councils and our own councillors make sure that we're aware that we can make contributions to that?
So I'm quite happy trying to draft that top side bit that various people have referred to. I will have a discussion with Councillor Brown on his motion point, because there's no point the top side and the motion being, if there is one, being noticeably different in a sense, because I thought I need to say more or less the same thing. And I suspect it could well be a motion, if you table one, that might have cross-party support. I don't think it's a particular politically expedient one from that perspective, from what I'm reading. And it would be, I think, not difficult to ensure, probably via Claire's team, that that goes out with some messaging to all town and parish councils, and if they choose to do something, then so be it, kind of thing. If they don't, then so be it. But that awareness wouldn't be a bad thing, I suspect. We're not always popular with every town and parish council, but an awareness that actually the government's going to restrict their involvement even further probably might be helpful.
Okay, we'll stop that at that point then. If we can move on to agenda item 13, development manager performance update.
Okay, conscious of time, so I'll try and keep this short. So yeah, this again just updates the monthly performance for the period of May this year. So yeah, we're doing okay. Again, 2 major decisions issued 100% within time, and yeah, not quite so good on the non-major performance, but still well within the sort of targets that we set ourselves. So 93% of those within time. So our 24-month performance is still very good for majors. It's dipped by 1% for non-majors, and I think that's reflective of a few things going on at the minute. So we've got quite a few cases that have been with us for a while, affected by nutrient neutrality, that are starting to come through for decision, and some of those obviously applicants have. Some feel quite aggrieved, not necessarily targeted at North Norfolk, but targeted at the people that initiated the nutrient neutrality honours, and some feel less keen to agree extensions of time. So I think that's starting to see a little bit of a hit on our performance. But I say it's not anything considerable to worry about. we're doing a bit of work with the team to make sure that officers do get extensions of times when they are required as early as possible, rather than letting them slip over. So so progress still there. Our quality of decision in terms of our appeal record again is still exceptionally good. It probably just dropped a little bit again on non-majors. We've had a couple of decisions come through where inspectors have allowed a couple of appeals, but if you look at our general performance in terms of appeal decisions, we are one of the top performing councils in the country for defending our decisions at appeal. Happy to take any questions. The 106 list is there. We don't have anyone from legal here today, but if you do have any questions on those, I'll try and answer them as best I can. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I recall during the excellent planning briefing that Mr. Ho gave, that there was some concern about the 106 procedure and system. And there was a plan, you were preparing a plan to improve that. And so I wondered where you were against that plan. There was particular concern about collections, etc.
So just, I appreciate I waffled for half an hour on the last item, but just to try and limit discussion on this item. So we've got a training session coming up for committee in a fortnight. And one of the topics is going to be 106 stuff. So we will ensure that issue is covered appropriately within that session. And then it's also easier because it won't be on public record recorded. So you can be a bit freer in what you might say to have a healthy discussion on it at that training session.
Yep. And item 14.
Okay, so appeal decisions. So we've had couple of new appeals on the list. In terms of actual decisions for planning applications, we've had 4 decisions that I just found my page. I have to revert to the analog. My digital versions decided to desert me. Yeah, so if you look on the bottom of page 115, we've had sorry, on page 115, we've had 4 decisions. Now, Mr. Williams did steal my thunder at the last committee when he did speak about the 2 decisions at Wells, so I'll gloss over those. And we've had a decision at Colby and a decision in Itteringham as well, and both of those were dismissed. So happy to take any comments on those. The inspectorate seemed a little bit slow on dealing with enforcement appeals. We've had 1 decision, but that's because the appeal was withdrawn, not because the inspectorate actually made a decision. So we are still waiting for quite a few inspectorate decisions. I think maybe they can't find any inspectors to deal with enforcement matters because it's probably a bit too complicated. But yes, happy to take any questions on the appeals matters.
It's a little bit concerning that some of the enforcement appeals have now been sitting there for over 18 months.
Chairman, thank you very much. I wanted to celebrate the Wells Enforcement Notice 230124, which is coming up for 2 years since the written appeal date. But even better than that, it's 12 months since the pizza van actually moved.
I'll say to that. Okay, so no questions. We'll close the meeting on my watch at 12:35. Thank you. Very interesting morning.